As the cost of living on Guam continues to rise, one of the hardest hit groups by the runaway inflation is the GovGuam retirees. Living on fixed incomes, they feel it more than most when the prices for staples such as groceries and gas and medicines climb. There are annual cost of living allowances of some $2,000 appropriated by the legislature from the general fund, and in the past 2 years, senators have opted to raise them incrementally by $100 at a time. Now, Senator Tello Taitigui wants to establish in statute more regular adjustments through a twice-a-year assessment by a special cost of living adjustment service. We'll talk with the senator about that and other changes to the GovGuam retirement system with attorney Mike Phillips and retirement fund director Paula Bloss coming right up. Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Hub. I'm Nestor Lecanto, and pleased to introduce our guests for this week, Senator Tello Taitigui, attorney Mike Phillips, and retirement fund director Paula Bloss. And we're here to talk about the retirees' COLA, or kind of lack of it. And let me start with you, Senator Taitigui, because you introduced a bill that was heard, I believe, last week, Bill number 2, that has to do with kind of overhauling the retirement COLA. Can you explain it to us what your bill is about?
Oh, coffee day. And thank you, Nestor, so much for having us be here today with Paula and Mike. I mean, if there's anybody to talk about COLA, you've got the right people here. So I appreciate their time too as well. But actually, I introduced this COLA bill in the last term in the 36th Guam legislature, Bill 253-36. Unfortunately, it didn't have the public hearing that was needed to move forward. In fact, what we did was in the budget bill, we increased the COLA through the budget bill, which is usually done the majority of time whenever you're increasing or decreasing. It all depends on the budget, you know, and in the 37th Guam legislature, I decided to reintroduce the bill, and it's bill number 2-37. So you tell I was anxious to get, you know, one of the first bills introduced when I came back in. And what the bill would do would put a economic group, service group together to discuss on what is the best fit for our retirees here when it comes to a cost of living adjustment, not necessarily a cost of living allowance, but moving toward a cost of living adjustment, almost similar to the federal government. My bill was pretty extensive. It was meant to get the conversation going, and it sure did. You know, everything from using a sliding scale, you know, taking ideas from the public, where people would come up to me and saying, well, why should someone with an annuity of $90,000 every year get the same amount of COLA adjustment as somebody who's only making $20,000 to $30,000 a year in annuity? So I incorporated that in the bill for this economic group, service group to review and implement when assessing this increase. The second was to discuss what about those who have left Guam? You know, how do we adjust that annuity for an adjustment? And we talked about the force multiplier by keeping the money here on Guam. You know, for every dollar that's spent on Guam, it's generated $1.54. But when money is taken off the island, you know, we lose that funding. So what about if we keep that money here on Guam? Another idea was going into different avenues about looking at the
Senator, let me cut you off there because I wanted to get Mike and Paula in on the discussion, and we'll get into more of the nuts and bolts of your bill in a moment. But Mike, you've represented a class of retirees all the way back to the Lola Cola days. Mm-hmm. If people as old as me can remember that far back, but and so you're very familiar, of course, with the challenges that the retirees face. You were at the hearing for Senator Taitigui's bill. You give us first of all your immediate thoughts on that.
Well, you know, when I commented, Nestor, and first I want to thank you, and it's an honor to be here with Paula, who I've worked with for years on the case, and now Senator Tello Taitigui, who's working on this not a very popular although it may seem like it's not a very popular subject because everybody's very sensitive about it. But I started by just saying, really, I think former Senator Sonny Shelton's bill that became law in 1988 was the way to go. It's just basically, if there's inflation, then the retirees get the benefit of that. And it's not really a benefit because it just keeps them at a level where they would have been if inflation had not hit. And so their salaries don't really go up, they just match inflation. Kind of what the federal government does. Now, over the years, the federal government has become, their COLA has become a little bit more structured and a lot more complicated, but it's really intended for the same purpose. And I think that's what Senator Tello's doing with regard to putting the people together to come out and come up with what would be considered the correct basket on Guam that would be measured to determine inflation. And so I'm in full support of that. I'm in full support of anything that helps the retirees, because having represented them for 15, 20 years, I really know how undignified it can become at times for those that work for the government of Guam for 30, 40 years, and then to retire into the state of poverty. There's just something wrong as a community when that's happening.
Yeah, and Paul, let me pull you in here. I know that you've been with the retirement fund for a long time. What are your thoughts on? Can you just kind of set the table on how important is the COLA to GovGuam retirees?
Well, thank you, Nestor, for actually having me on. Approximately about 70% of our retirees earn less than $40,000. So that's a big chunk of the base that we actually provide annuities to. The COLA, I'm actually in support of the COLA. Senator Titagui's bill just had some actually mentioned some things that we just had some concerns with, as far as who would actually be eligible for this type of an adjustment, and whether or not it really was something that we could actually defend if it was limited to just the people that lived on Guam, especially since the base COLA of $2,000 is already being paid to everyone,
Sure.
that is a retiree or a survivor. But
Yeah.
I do agree with Attorney Phillips and Senator Titagui in terms of we've got to do something for these retirees, just to make sure that they're not living in poverty.
All right. On that note, we've got to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the details of Senator Titagui's bill, and also some ideas from Attorney Phillips about how the system might also be modified. We'll be back right after this. Okay, we're back from the break, and Senator Titagui, before the break, we were talking a little bit more about what are the nuts and bolts of your bills. Tell us what some of those highlights are and some of the challenges that might be still need further discussion.
I think the highlight is just having the service group put together to have the discussion on how we can kind of mirror the federal government and what they do on their adjustments that are being made. Of course, in the States, it's a little bit different. You have farmers who live in a rural area versus those who live in like a city, like New York City. It's been adjusted based on not just well, it is adjusted based on where they're living, their cost of living. And Guam, of course, is small enough that everyone should get that same amount. Ideas in the bill is to basically discuss the sliding scale, like I mentioned earlier. Ideas about, do we give that same type of cost living adjustment for those retirees who are living off island? So what my bill basically does is start the ball rolling in discussion, if anything. On May 12th, we will have a roundtable discussion at the legislature, a public hearing. Senator San Augustine was kind enough to put a date to bring more people to the table. And I'm hoping that we get people from the University of Guam who who discuss economics. We get Department of Labor to discuss from there, to come to the table and find a way that we can help our retirees who, like Paula said, 70% are making below $40,000. I mean, some even making $20,000 a year.
And Mike, do you see? Go ahead. Sorry, Senator.
That's basically it. We've got to get the ball rolling. We cannot come to a number that is just pulled out of the hat, just saying, okay, 100 this year, 100 next year. And another thing is, there really is nothing codified in law to have a base pay of a COLA pay of 2,000. 1 year, if Paula probably can chime in on that. Oh, 1 year, Paula, it was how much, the COLA? And then it fell from 700 COLA up to, then it went to 1,500, and then it changed again. So there's really no set amount. And that's what we wanted.
Subject to political whim, was it?
Exactly, subject to political whim. And that's what we're trying to stop right now. Not make this political, make this about really helping the people, the retirees.
Yeah, and Mike, I imagine that if it were restricted geographically, that there would be a lot of complaints coming from the U.S., where a lot of our GovGuam retirees are, and should it be restricted geographically in your mind?
Well, I think that is probably something, Nestor, that should be discussed when you bring everybody from all sides together. Because I think there are really good arguments on all the sides. The payment for that, for example, a large portion of it, not all of it, will come from the people of Guam here. And so, there's that argument. On the other hand, it's like, well, somebody dedicated 30, 40 years of their life. The way I see it, and the way that I think others see it, but they just haven't articulated it, is the fact that if we start with retirement as a cost of employment, then we don't do this. Then we don't feel like we have to take care of a needy class at the end. Because quite frankly, you can hand our Manunko a check, but at the end of the day, quite frankly, boy, who are you to hand me a check? That's mine. I'm not begging. I'm here to collect. You owe me. And that's really the way our Manunko are should be able to feel in the last years of their life, and to a lot of them, the best years of their life. They need to live with dignity. And if we treat it as a cost of employment from the very beginning, and after the groups are put together and the decisions are made, they're permanent, they're codified, and that's the way it's going to be. Then from day one, I know that if I stick it out with the government of Guam, or I stick it out with a certain department, I'm going to have a really decent retirement. And so maybe my wages are not as high as the federal government, or maybe even a few choice areas in the private sector. But I'll tell you, if the government of Guam returns to one of the nicer retirements, we're going to hold on to employees, and that's a huge savings in cost. It's better for the employees, and it's a heck of a lot better for the retirees.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like the U.S. Social Security system, right? Where upon hiring, you are kind of written into the system, and that's where you're going to be for as long as you work for the government. Yeah.
Yeah, they vest after a certain amount, and you're right, the employee contributes. And we were kind of discussing this, at least for me, it was kind of off the cuff, as they say, during the public hearing. But with regard to Paula's role and the fund, it won't remove them, because they can contribute immensely. But what we've got to do is not threaten them, and so we've got to be able to give them and have them give what they can. But at the same time, I took Social Security as an actual class when I was an econ major at the University of Hawaii. And a lot of people are bothered by the fact that our kids are going to support us. That doesn't bother me at all. You support them, they support you. Guess what? Their kids are going to support them. And as long as that continues, we're fine. And so while people may complain about, the Social Security system being on the brink, it's not on the brink because of the design. It's just on the brink because of the financial crisis that the United States has suffered, honestly, years ago, not so much presently. So if you combine all three, then I think that you're going to do well. The three would be Paula and the fund, right? And they can tell you what they need in order to give you the maximum amount for the dollar you give them. and you have the employees going to have to give up a little bit more, and at the same time, that employee's kids or the younger generation are going to kick in, like I did and you did, I think, for the field house at the University of Guam. We did that, and others are doing it now. I'm assuming, and that's how a community takes care of not the retiree. They don't need to be taking care of an employee. So that person, when they sign on with the government of Guam, they sign on for life. They sign on for this amount working and then this amount in retirement. But they're not going to be treated as the needy class, because they're not. It's just that we haven't done our job by remembering that, oh yeah, that's right. That is part of the package of employment, and that is called retirement.
Okay, we got to take a short break, and I promise, Paula, when we come back, we'll go straight to you and you can get your thoughts on this, and also on the health of the retirement fund, which I understand has improved over the years. So we got to take a quick break, and we'll be back right after this. Okay, we are back, and I wanted to ask Paula Bloss, who is the retirement fund director. First of all, before the break, Mike talked about a system in which the government employee newly hired would immediately be a part of this retirement system. And then as he or she goes through the process and becomes fully vested, that becomes an entitlement for them at the end of the career when they retire from GovGuam. Get your thoughts on that. And then I wanted to ask you about the health of the retirement fund and whether you can afford what we hope to be able to pay out to the retirees. So go ahead, Paula.
Okay, so with regards to what Mike said, when a new GovGuam employee comes on board, the retirement system that they actually become a member of is actually mandatory for them if they are a GovGuam employee. The current system that they're actually enrolled in right now is a 401 type plan, which is a defined contribution plan. But the legislature, in cooperation with the fund, actually created what we call the defined benefit 1.75 plan, which is a much leaner defined type benefit. And that plan actually is going to be available to anyone that's in the defined contribution plan now to elect to transfer between June and December of this year. Doesn't become effective until January 1, 2024. All new hires that come into GovGuam starting January 2024 will have the option now to choose between the two plans, defined contribution, which is a 401-like plan, or defined benefit 1.75 plan. The defined benefit 1.75 plan is linked to age. So when somebody reaches the age of 62 with a minimum of 5 years of service, then they'll be eligible to retire. But their benefit's going to be calculated based on the 5 years that they've actually worked. So it's service to calculate the percentage of whatever that benefit's going to be. And it's a percentage of the average of your 3 highest salaries throughout your entire career with Government of Guam. That could be a pretty good pension for somebody, considering now that GovGuam employees' salaries are now starting to get to a level where nationally—
That's a whole different show, salary.
I know, okay. But it actually helps with the calculation of an annuity. The service is definitely going to give you a higher percentage of whatever that average salary would be.
I wanted to ask you, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to ask you about the health of the fund. I mean, we used to talk about, this huge unfunded mandate of the Government of Guam Retirement Fund. We don't hear that a whole lot anymore. So how well are you guys doing?
We're actually not doing too bad, Nestor. The fund is actually doing quite well, considering the volatility of the markets over the years. But for the last 15, 16 years, the legislature has actually been actuarially funding the plan based on whatever that actuarial rate is, which is a good thing, because now going forward, it increases the security ratio of the fund in terms of assets. The fund has been able to invest in diversify their investments, with regards to the assets. So it's actually in a pretty good position right now. DB plans have been proven to be actually, from a cost perspective, a lot cheaper to run. And as long as the fund is not providing benefits that is not fully paid for, I think we'll be okay.
All right, Senator Tidigu, I know we digressed a little bit, but I want to get back to the COLA issue in particular. So you're suggesting probably a sliding scale where it's heavily weighted more towards the lower salaried employees or lower salaried retirees, as opposed to the ones, as you mentioned, who are making $90,000, $100,000 in their retirement annuity.
Yeah, that was some of the comments that were made from actually retirees, and I thought to put it into the COLA bill that I've introduced. And again, the service group that comes together, they can give us two, one with a sliding scale and one without. But in 2022, I'm sorry, March of 2022, I'd asked Paula for some information, in fact, to look at that as well as we were looking at the sliding scale. And we were coming up with annuities of those. I think we had a whole list of those individuals making below 40,000 was like 70%. So, someone asked me, okay, well, how many people are out there making, like $95,000 to $100,000 in annuities in the government of Guam? And according to the information I received from retirement as of March 2022-17, there are about 35 retirees there, but there's about 84 retirees receiving over 100,000. You have about 36 retirees receiving 90 to 95. You have 38, 85 to 90, and the list goes on. And then you have about 165. But the bulk of it is, many of them are, 40,000 and below. You're looking about 309 who make 37 to 40,000, 309 individuals. Then you have 327 making as low as 35. Then you have 385 making as low as 32, and then 426 making as low as 30, and then you have 420 retirees making low 27. So these numbers are quite, staggering, to see this, and they need the most help.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone, certainly not on this panel, is going to argue that they don't. We got to take a real quick break and be back to wrap up the show. Unfortunately, we're running short on time, so let me take that break, and we'll be right back. Don't go away. All right, Mike, let me kind of start the wrap up here with you. Obviously, you would agree that there is a need for COLA for retirees. How do you think that should be resolved ultimately on how we're going to come up with that number?
Well, I think the choices are clear, Nestor. I don't have the answer, and my answer probably wouldn't be popular, but it's either one, you do the sliding scale. Where that starts to slide is the real question. I've suggested that when we all agree on what we all spend money on, gas, food, et cetera, once you get past that, then you stop. And then the rest is kind of luxury, right? And so maybe they would get a little or maybe not get anything after that. That would be one possibility. The second possibility would be just to give everybody across the board the 10% that are now making those astronomical figures. They were probably the 10% that were making the astronomical numbers when they worked for the government. And again, that's how you attract people, right? You don't have to pay them those astronomical salaries if you've got a really good retirement plan. So there is a balance. I think both answers, it's not a right and wrong answer. It's which answer fits best and which answer will fly with the legislature and the people of Guam and the retirees.
All right, and Paula, real quick, you will implement whatever the legislature passes, right? If it becomes law.
Only because it's generally funded. It's funded by the general fund, so.
Right, right. Yeah, and there's that distinction because the fund, you know, builds itself, but there is some COLA funding from the general fund, which is all of the taxpayers. Tello, last word. What do you want to say?
Yeah,
30
I
seconds.
just wanted to say real quick that one of the other options too is to have this COLA being paid, this adjustment being paid monthly and not like every November, because the people need the money every day. I mean, every month they need to pay their power, their water, their food on the table. So we're looking at more spreading this out through a 12-month period, like the federal government does as well.
All right, thanks everybody. Senator Tello Taitigui, Attorney Mike Phillips, and Retirement Director Paula Bloss. Thank you for joining us. I'm Nestor Lecanto. We'll see you again next week on The Hub.